Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to part 2. I know that you all wanted to have more information about this challenge and what we talked about. We had concepts and definitions that we already talked about, and today we can provide a review, but we're hoping to have more of a discussion for this session. My name is Alicia Allen. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion here at NTID. And I'll let Rachel introduce herself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our part 2 session. My name is Rachel Green. I am Jerry Buckley's designated interpreter. I also newly am collaborating with the DDI office, and Alicia is our leader, and I'm very excited to be working in collaboration with them.
So just a couple of housekeeping things that we want to set up. We'd like this to be a safe space. So I know that sometimes people think that safe spaces aren't really safe, and they're using this concept of a brave space. We're talking about really sensitive issues, things that can easily offend people or trigger emotions. So we want, this space to be as safe as possible for everyone. At the same time, we want everyone to have an opportunity to learn by participating in the dialogue. We accept everyone for who they are and where they're at in their life. And we want to foster discussion. And like I mentioned before, as somebody's making a comment, it might hit you a certain way. So I just want to set up the expectation that you might feel uncomfortable. It's a good thing it won't be life or death, but I'm hoping that everyone will take the opportunity to think about why a certain comment is uncomfortable for them. Please give yourself permission to change your mind as well. And I'd really like everyone to accept and embrace other people's perspectives as well. We all have our own lives and they're different from each other. And so that means that we can offer each other valuable perspectives. And I'd really like to emphasize that today's session is for you. Last session, we did a lot of the talking and providing definitions and concepts, but this session, we want to have a discussion. We do have some prompts to lead the discussion, but this is really your time. I hope that you'll participate in this conversation after having time to digest the last session. I'm just going to provide a brief review of the 21-day equity challenge. It was sponsored by United Way and the city of Rochester. They really set this hope in becoming more anti-racist. How we can have equitable environments. So the city of Rochester pulled in several different resources from all over the country. I think there were over 1,000 people who participated, so that's great. But the key point from that challenge was to really value diversity. There are so many ways that people are unique and diverse. It's race, it's able-bodied, it's LGBTQIA+. It can include women, intellectual challenges. So there are several ways to be diverse. And that's really the beauty of being different people. Now, the concept of inclusivity is to work towards making sure spaces and places are inclusive, meaning that you might have to think a different way than you're used to, but thinking about everyone and what needs they would have and trying to make sure that you are providing for those needs. For instance, captions. How many times do people think to actually turn those on? My daughter is 4 and she's even looking for captions. So thinking about being inclusive. The next one is equality. We want to make sure that everybody has equal access to resources and to education. So we really have to think about what equality actually means. There's another term that is equitable. And if you think about our history in America, they used to have water fountains for Black people or colored people and white people. Now, was that really fair? I mean, if you think about the pictures that you've seen, the water fountains for white people looked clean and new, whereas the water fountains for colored people were, dirty and looked like they needed to be fixed. So we have to think about, okay, yes, they provided water fountains for both parties, but was it really equitable? The next concept is an ally. So, displaying anti-racist behavior, acknowledging privilege, and trying to lift the experience of Black and Brown people. I know that we often hear ally used in the LGBTQ plus community as people who support the community but aren't necessarily members of it. They call them allies, but really it's more than that. It's allyship. And I think sometimes we're not really clear about what an ally is. Ally really includes action, thinking about what privileges I have and how can I use those to help? How can I use them to help provide an environment that's going to be more equitable and equal? So it's not just supporting a specific group, but it's getting involved and participating. So to take it even further than being equitable, we think about liberation. It's the idea of what it would look like as a perfect world. We wouldn't even have to be concerned about being equitable because everyone has the same opportunities. It's automatically equitable, it's automatically equal. The next step is really liberation. We want to encourage all of us to, really think about if there was no fence in front of us, no barriers. I know you've seen the picture of the boxes of there's a fence and these children are trying to look over the fence to watch the baseball game. And they have different sized boxes to stand on that shows equitable. But what the point of liberation is that there wouldn't be a fence there in the first place.
We did want to do a check-in to see how people were feeling from the last time, because as Alicia mentioned, we did a lot of the presenting and we gave and shared a lot of information, and some people may have been feeling overwhelmed, other people were feeling excited, other people feeling ready to go, and other people might have felt confused and not sure what to do with all of the information. So first we wanted to check in to see how you were feeling right now in this moment, in this space, in our context that we are in today. And if you have any questions or ideas, anything that you would like for us to review quickly, as Alicia just reviewed those vocabulary terms, we can delve into things more quickly. We can expand on other definitions. We want to make sure that people understand what these words mean. So we want to make sure that people feel included, and you can participate by typing in the chat, or you can open your video window if you have a comment. This is definitely a time for us to discuss. Right now, everybody has their videos closed, but if you do want to make a comment during the discussion part, and you would like to express it in your spoken or sign language, you can open your video and share. So I see Keith. Keith is asking, I would like to ask about the appropriate signs for the different ethnic groups. My question to Keith is, do you have specific ideas in mind or specific words? Let's see what Keith has to say.
So yeah, I wanted to discuss signs. Through the years, signs have evolved. In the past, we would sign Japanese with a J near the I, but then it is changed to a sign that represents the shape of the country. So recently I've seen people signing black with a B hand shape instead of just the one finger hand shape. But then I was told that I shouldn't use the B hand shape and I should only use the one finger hand shape when I'm signing black. That only Black people can sign the black with the B. So that led me to think, what really are the appropriate signs? Do we say brown people for Latinx, or do we sign, there's a variety of signs for Latino, Hispanic, or Spanish. So I guess I'm curious about, is it appropriate to use black and brown? I mean, we wouldn't call people yellow, when we're talking about Asians. So, and we also don't use Indian with the F hand shape from the mouth to the ear. We do kind of indigenous Native American now. So I just think it would be a nice discussion to have about what currently are the appropriate signs, if you have any ideas from the community. Rachel and I are happy to provide a response, but I'd also like to invite those in the audience. What's your name sign, Keith? Okay, thank you. People in the audience can feel free to respond to this as well, because again, this session is really for you. So is there anyone in the audience who'd like to give a chance at a response?
And Rachel saying, Alicia, while people are thinking, maybe we could talk about the difference in the way people produce the sign for Black, meaning a Black individual, either using the one hand or the B hand shape.
While people are thinking, I can give you what I have seen and what I've noticed. So there are, specific individuals who prefer specific things. So I think we just have to respect people and the signs that they like to use to talk about their own identity. I think it's important to talk to people and ask them what their preferred sign is. I just don't think that we can have a specific sign that's appropriate for everyone. Just kind of like the example that you gave about signing Black with the B versus signing Black with the one. I'm going to kind of leave that one alone as is, but I think before you go into a situation where you're going to be signing these signs, it's important to know who your audience is. And to, really set up some preferred signs before you go into the situation. I don't necessarily think that's the best, but I think it's a safer approach to use.
It really is no secret that language evolves and it changes over time. And a sign that might have been appropriate in the past may have changed and would be considered inappropriate now. I agree with Alicia. I think that sign language is not my native language. So right or wrong, as a hearing person, as I enter a situation, I want to respect everyone's identity, their intersexuality, their lived experience. And so I want to make sure that it's a safe space. And I want to absorb what people are saying and how they're identifying themselves. And so for somebody to say not to use the B hand shape when signing Black, it would be a way to understand where they're coming from and respect that point of view. As the concept and our understanding evolves, the signs that we choose to use when we're expressing those concepts will evolve as well.
And that makes sense. You know, I'm thinking about, I'm from New York and how that is signed. But, you know, people will say from New York City, and that's, you know, with the NYC finger spelling. And it's like, no, no, I'm from New York, signing the actual state. And in New York City, you know, how New York State is signed, some people use that for Manhattan. So people who are native to that area will say, no, you're not from New York City. They list the specific boroughs that they're from, like you're from Queens, you're from the Bronx. So I can certainly see how that would make sense. It depends on whose identity we're talking about and what signs that the signs that they use. Yeah, you know, I think it'd be really nice if a Black ASL course was offered. I know that my colleague, Joseph Hill, this is his specialty, and especially this month, you know, he has been called upon to speak to Black ASL. And I think it would be a really fascinating course to have. So maybe that's an opportunity for Joseph to offer a class. But, you know, I definitely understand your point. It would be nice to know. Thank you, Keith. If
We'll
there's an
see.
interest in a Black ASL course, then those in positions of power will need to ensure that there is a space and time in the Black instructor's workload in order to teach the course. And that's something I completely agree with. I know that RIT is currently looking into African American or Black studies right now. I think they're gathering, you know, different people to be involved with that process. And I think we're going to have courses offered in that, you know, with the other colleges in RIT and here at NTID. So I think that there are a few, you know, courses who would benefit from having instructors that actually have that lived experience. Because it's no secret that minority faculty at NTID and RIT wide and other institutes, you know, are bogged down with service requirements. And, you know, when there's only a few of them in the environment, they often get tapped more than their white colleagues. And so they end up being overburdened. So definitely, I absolutely agree with that comment, Sarah. It's a good point. Carrie has a question, but isn't sure if it's appropriate to ask at this time. And my response to that is, you know, some people will say, oh, that's a stupid question. I have a stupid question. But a question not asked is stupid. So the point of that means please ask your questions. There are no stupid questions. This is the space and the time to ask those questions if you feel comfortable. So there were several concerns. I'm trying to summarize this question. Looking for some type of guidance or support on the different issues and situations that are occurring on campus. For example, at the presidential awards, there was no person of color who received an award. And then social media's response to Luann Haggerty being recognized for her work on Fences, which is a Black play. So how do we respond to that? And that's really it's a good point. I think regardless of the situation, it's very important to gather as much information as you can. I know that there has been concerns about Black people not being treated right, but it's better to gather information from the horse's mouth and ask that person directly what their experience is. I saw this certain situation happen. How are you doing? Was that the right, accurate information that I'm hearing? Sometimes, people will make assumptions and spread information with those assumptions and may not have the whole story. So for the presidential awards kind of situation where there is no person of color receiving an award, I think, that really requires people of color to be in the room when they're thinking about giving out awards. Are there people of color on the awards committee? And so we have to think about who's in power and a way to dismantle the systems that are making that happen so that people of color have the opportunity to access these spaces. So when people of color are in those spaces, will they feel comfortable standing up or will they not? If they're only one, person of color and all of their colleagues are white, sometimes it's not easy to stand up and, make a lone request for or go against the grain. So if there's more than one BIPOC person in the room, it's much easier to fight for something. And so we need to be invited to the room when those decisions are happening. That's just one thought that I have. And to those that have power, they need to make a way for that to happen. And then once that does happen, they need to provide support to those people that they're bringing in.
We are skipping ahead because this conversation is coming up now and its importance because of the time. Kevin's point is well taken. We have to think about how we're functioning and operating. And if you look at this slide, if this is what we're pursuing, if this is what we're trying to achieve, then how we get there is important. And there are different pictures that are showing different frames. And it looks at the kind of work that we're doing. So the framework that we are developing, the colonizing framework, is very important. This was a topic that was one of the topics from the first session that people thought about it. We had questions about it, and we thought we'd include it more of a review, but kind of also leading to, where people are considering where they are in their process. And systems. The systems that we interact with are full of privilege. And we think about dismantling them and then rebuilding them. But we also have to understand our own individual privilege as white people. This is open for discussion. Thinking about what Alicia has talked about and what Kevin had mentioned and about BIPOC people not receiving the awards, and Alicia talking about the BIPOC people who may not have been in the room, we are still sitting in a place of privilege when they are absent. And so we need to really look at ourselves and look at all of the parts of the system in which we're interacting with. we must do that. And so we have questions on this slide. What does white privilege look like? How does it make you feel? When you first heard or saw that concept, white privilege, what first came to your mind? Were you doubtful of it, worried? What emotion came forth from you? And how do you feel about that? What has changed? What is that leading you to? And you don't have to answer all three of these questions. These are questions to prompt your thinking and to elicit response from the community here. And so we want this to be a safe space for discussion. So if you're thinking about the first question, what was your initial reaction when you first heard the concept of white privilege? I don't know about like if rules help people, but sometimes it's like deciding something or making assumptions about something. People will ask maybe 3 to 5 questions, and they might ask me about white privilege or what's happened or what's maybe been overlooked or what we're actually talking about. And through that questioning process, I think that helps us to alleviate some of the oppression, that it's not isolated to an individual alone. And it's not necessarily, you know that we're part of a bigger system that's at play here, but it's important to externally process what we're feeling and what we're thinking. And it's important to be in a safe place and a place where we can make this work, accept the individuals for who they are, and especially accepting yourself for who you are.
I'm trying to think if I have a comment or more of a question. I think really Rachel summarized it beautifully, and there's nothing really to add to that. So I do see that Kathy Derrick has a comment, please.
This is Kathy. I just wanted to add a comment about myself and white privilege. I think of white privilege as a journey. The label as a white person and thinking about white privilege, I have to say, when I first heard that, I was defensive because I thought of my family as an immigrant family moving from Italy over to the US. And then I thought about it and I realized I do have privilege. Somebody called me and said they were looking for an apartment. And so I called a friend and they said, nope, we don't have any apartments in that area. And then she called and they said, no, we don't have any apartments in that area. And then I called and the person's like, yep, we have plenty of apartments in this area. And so this anecdote with my friend Val was that it was because of voice. I remember when Maya Angelou was here, I was asked to interpret that, and I was very excited to do so because I look up to her. But Valerie Randleman, I thought, was the important person to be a part of that event because she's a Black person and we worked together and we did a great job. And after that job, everybody complimented Valerie. And honestly, I was a little offended, but I realized that there was a place for that. And so I'm learning through my journey that I need to step back. With Valerie, as a person of color, that was very important. And so those are just 2 stories in my journey about white privilege.
Oh, thank you so much, Kathy, for sharing that. There were 3 good points that Kathy brought up. It really is a journey, and that journey is going to last a lifetime. It's impossible to learn and know everything about all cultures, all races, all ethnicities. It's just impossible. There's too many people in our world. And that means that we also can't think that we're done learning. It's going to be a continuous journey. There was a presentation about mental health with college students at the university where I received my master's and PhD. And they were talking about adapting assessments and therapies And well, by the way, my degree is in clinical psychology. So that's really my background. But the presentation was about how to adapt the assessments and tests that are given thinking about diversity. So yes, for white people having to go through the journey of white privilege and also accepting the idea that when they may work with somebody from a different culture, that if they get along with one person from a different culture, that they'll be fine with all other people they might work with in that same culture. But that's not necessarily true. I think cultural competence gives people a false sense of security and that now they're competent and they don't need to do any other work. But Dr. Taj Smith from RIT's Division of Diversity and Inclusion uses a different term, which is cultural humility. And that means that it's a journey that you're going to be on until you're no longer a part of this earth. Races, they might be impacted by things differently. There really is nothing that we can learn and apply it to the same group of people, because even within the same culture, there are differences. Starting to practice cultural humility is very important. And I think that's something that we'll discuss more in part 3. We'll briefly review it in part 3, which is next month. I'll be happy to review that.
I have given presentations about deaf culture. And hearing people will often give me a face like this, like, what are you talking about? And I will compare deaf culture to hearing culture, and I will make some parallel distinctions to give them a greater idea. And so it's more concrete for them. And so when you think about white privilege, and that, I think it would help us. So for example, I didn't realize that the Band-Aids that I use, the Band-Aids, have a color to them. I never realized that, they were colorized for a specific reason. And so an example of white privilege is that we don't have to think about that. Where are the Black Band-Aids for Black people to match their skin color? So that's one small example. Another thing that hit me hard was about Africa and the country of Kenya. There was Peace Corps training in Kenya, and in the town, it was a small village. There were shops on this street. Outside the store, like the department store, there was a woman who was standing like a mannequin. Rachel's asking Keith, is it a mannequin? And Keith is saying yes. And in every instance that I saw in Kenya, all of the mannequins in all the shops and all the stores were white. And that really stuck out in that culture. Again, more evidence of white privilege. So why wouldn't they have Black mannequins? And that was a thought-provoking question for me. So I just thought I'd share those two memories with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for providing this workshop. When I think about white privilege, and I first saw that word, I have to say I was offended. I grew up, my parents, we moved from Croatia. My parents worked very hard. They had a tough life. I'm a first-generation American. I worked very hard throughout my life. And then I think it was maybe almost 2 years ago, one of my neighbors, a new family moved in. They were a Black family. I was very excited to have diversity in the neighborhood because it wasn't a very diverse neighborhood. And a year later, I found out they had a daughter, and I'm like, oh, I wish I knew. You know, they had a 1-year-old daughter. So I decided to go to the store. I went to Walmart, I went to different stores, and I noticed that all the games and all the pictures and all the advertising had white little children on it. And I was afraid to buy them something with like a white child on the package to be offensive to my new neighbors. I wanted to show them of my awareness, but at the same time, it was hard for me to find an appropriate toy that I felt would convey, you know, that support to my family and my neighborhood. And there really aren't any people of color in the advertising industry or in especially for toys. And so I finally did find something, and they were overjoyed. But the point is, when we think about how we commercialize products, our marketing, the TV show called The Good Doctor was on yesterday, and I was watching an episode of it. And a Black woman was a patient, and the doctor was talking about having to work hard to please the white individuals and to accommodate them. And at first, I didn't really understand what the comment was, but then by the end of the episode, I understood. The white majority are those in power, and people of color have to work harder to accommodate the people in power. And so, even though I've had different experiences than others, I'm understanding that perspective much better now. My awareness has opened. Veronica, I mean, both your and Keith's stories really highlight, and Kathy Derrick, who was the first person who spoke, are all highlighting the journey that white privileged people undertake. When you first hear of white privilege, you have a reaction. It's emotional. Many people don't accept it right away. At first, people may feel offended. Kathy Derrick felt sad, or, you know, she was kind of a little mournful because her person of color colleague got more attention than she did at that one event. It could be that, you know, it's not easy to acknowledge and accept the white privilege that you haven't known about. And also, it is a journey. And the final goal is to use the white privilege that you have for the betterment of everyone. Personally, in a meeting, Taja says, all it takes is commitment. You can't fix everything in the world without the commitment. We need people to be committed. We need people to engage in the cause. We need people to take action. Thank you, Veronica.
So I know it's going to take, you know, an opportunity to be able to really kind of look into yourself and think about privilege and power and white privilege. But knowing what we know now, as a collective society, so what is that going to mean for us now? Here at RIT, NTID, for your community, what is going to have to change in our thought processes? You know, going forward, now that you have this information, what are we going to do with it? For example, if you see here in the last picture on the right, it says liberation. You see equality, equity, justice, and then getting rid of the fence in the first place is liberation. We all are standing there and we all can see it because there is no fence blocking our way. So what do we need to do to get there? What are the challenges that would prevent us from getting there? I'd really just like to know what everyone's thoughts are.
If you look at the justice picture on that slide, notice that each of the individuals in the slide are taking down that fence or that wall. And, you know, justice is different things. It's not only the criminal justice system, justice as a concept. And so you notice from the slide and the picture in the slide of justice, it takes work on our part to take down the framework. And so you might want to think about, how does that feel? The system is set. As an individual, I don't know what I can say about that. And I don't know how I could even change it. And it feels like a lot. So just thinking about it, I think the first reaction would be, wow, this is a lot of work. But if it leads to liberation, it will take time. But some people might feel overwhelmed by it and feel that it's impossible. I know there's a range of possibilities here. And so let's be creative and think about what we can do for that.
So I'm looking at the comment in the chat from Hope. He was saying that BIPOC and allies need to work together in this effort. It's, you know, about educating. A lot of times people say, please help. In those situations, BIPOC people typically have to fight to start dismantling the system. But if we have allies and they work with us, it's going to be much easier to take that fence down. You know, because several times BIPOC people have ripped fences down, but then they show up in another place. It's almost like that game where you hit one thing and another thing comes up. So as many times as we try to break down these fences, other fences continue to pop up and barriers are there. You know, it's just, if we think about access, it's really nice when people think about providing interpreters, and we don't have to, as deaf people, don't have to explain why we need it and justify and ask. They just have it ready because they've thought about it. So imagine if that barrier was removed everywhere, it would make the world a better place. It's almost impossible to imagine that, right? To have all barriers removed. Now, again, Rochester is not a perfect example, but it definitely is an easier place to have access. So I think that's one step in the right direction. Oh, hey, Sarah.
Hello. I wanted to say, in general, these types of discussions are important, and I hope they can continue. I hope that NTID can set up a community dialogue on a monthly basis to continue this type of discussion, because we need to see things change and evolve. We're all learning, we're all growing, and I think we need this to continue. Now, assigning this to Alicia's plate, I know it's a good idea, but I think we need to find another facilitator for this type of discussion, because I know Alicia is very busy with her schedule and I don't want to add anything more to her plate. But thank you both, Alicia and Rachel. Thank you for everything you're doing, and I do have to leave.
Sarah is bringing attention to a very good point. Sometimes it is nice to have POC representation, but oftentimes we get taxed with a minority tax. And yes, Sarah is right. I do have a very busy schedule. And I could manage it maybe once or twice, but I couldn't do it on a monthly basis for sure. But it's a very good point that we need to be mindful of. And, you know, it's not just me. There are other faculty and staff thinking about those who are on tenure track. We need some understanding and flexibility for POCs on tenure track, because they're often tasked with service, so much so that they're unable to focus on other items. So I know that it is important, scholarship is important and to publish is important, but we need to somehow give credit for the amount of service that POC people provide in this environment. And hopefully we continue to work to dismantle the system. It will be everybody working towards that goal instead of just one person trying to fight for it.
Agreed. I think another good point to add to this discussion also is involving, as Hope said, allies in the discussion. Bringing the allies together with their BIPOC colleagues is important because, white people, we can't do it alone. Maybe we could, but really, people of color can't do it alone. And it's really not something that people should be doing alone or in silos. It should not be an individual task. It should be a community coming together to work together with the common values and goals, working as colleagues to, figure out ways of being. It's hard to envision the system. The system is so big. NTID is a system which is under the larger system of the university. And it's definitely not an easy task by any means. And my comment is not to overwhelm anyone, but to plant a seed to help people to think about the framework and how it applies to your work here, and specifically in ways that we can connect with each other. NTID has the anti-racism plan. I'm not sure how many people have had the opportunity to read it, but there are aspects that relate to the concept of dismantling the system and then rebuilding it, deconstructing it. The point is, the system is running and it's not necessarily working. And so we need to engage in our anti-racism plan and work together and continue to lead with that vision of the deconstruction and the reconstruction of an accessible, equitable world without barriers. One that is open to all, where there are no barriers based on race, gender, any intersectional identity that a person would have. And so that's something to keep in mind, that we are leading ourselves in the right direction.
The first step of really looking into ourselves is so important. I was impressed that some departments already came to me and let me know that they are taking a few minutes of their department, meeting to talk about anti-racism and what more they could do. Especially the College of Liberal Studies, which is my home department. So thanks for that. It used to be my home department. So really departments focusing on taking that time to have these discussions. So it can start with just you and your department. When your department models that, that becomes the norm. And then you don't have to think about it. And then that allows other people to see what you're doing and wanting the same, and then they'll emulate that. So you would be amazed at how much 2 or 3 people can impact a larger community. So don't feel like your work doesn't contribute, because it does produce results. It touches me so much to hear that people on campus are looking to work with the anti-racism plan and really get into it and figure out how they can change things, from chairs to directors to AVPs. They are saying that this is a priority now, something that we need to talk about. So we're already in the process of changing.
I am in support of what Rachel and Alicia just outlined for us. In our department, we have been really getting to work on this and looking at our curriculum, taking an in-depth look at our curriculum. And we've recognized that we don't have enough diversity within our curriculum, and we want to add that to it. Also within our analysis, we want, as we consider accepting new students to our program, we want to consider the percentage of students who identify as BIPOC. In this past fall, we were surprised that 27 students who were in the entering class identified as BIPOC, and that's very good. And so that is 24% of the entering class. Now, if you look at the fourth year class, there's a smaller number of students in that class. And so we have to work on our retention, and we have to work and partner with the NTID admissions office. We finally got 15 new scholarships for students. And of the 15, 5 were awarded to BIPOC students. They were just approved last week. So it's definitely a work in process. I know that we do not have enough BIPOC faculty. We only have one BIPOC individual, and we had 2, but 1 person left the department. I am hiring 3 new adjunct faculty, and all identify as BIPOC. So I'm thrilled about that. And the next is to search for full-time faculty who identify as BIPOC. That is our an ultimate goal we have. We're also in a search for an ASL tutor, and we would like that individual to identify as BIPOC. So it's putting all the individual parts together, and that's what we're doing in our department on a department level. It's definitely a work in progress. And Rachel saying, but you are starting with commitment, Keith. And then through that commitment, you're having these successes. And some of these things are measurable and quantifiable. And some things are qualitative. They're more personal, they're experiential. And so bringing both of those together, having some hard measures, I'm proud that I graduated from the program. I'm proud that you're chair of the program that I graduated from. And I'm looking forward to the great work that your program will continue to do because of your commitment to this.
Really having to unpack and be willing to accept criticism as well, which is tough. You know, that is not an easy thing to think about, being criticized. But I think it's all about how we approach it. If we look at it in a way of wanting to grow and learn, then it won't feel like criticism. It'll be cherishing people giving you information.
And you'll learn from that too, Rachel saying.
So sometimes reframing the process really will help us in our work. You know, I could be wrong, but my intention is to understand and get more information. So there are certain ways that we can reframe to make this work feel less like criticism. If we can embrace it and learn about that person, again, then we can just value the information that they're providing and working with that.
This is Rachel signing. These are the last few slides I think will be easy to get through because it's more food for thought, things for you to think about and remember. And so thinking about, does this start with the individual or does it start at a higher level? This is more thinking about, the system is overwhelming. Change is difficult. How much power do I have? And so you think about all of those broad level ideas and concepts, and then it comes right back to you and thinking about what you can do on a personal level to become active. These 4 questions don't all have to be answered. It's whichever question speaks to you that you feel that you want to participate in the discussion with. But this is the start of the process. Be nice to yourself, give yourself grace, accept where you are. And after you've done that, then think about what work needs to be done. You can analyze yourself some more or some situations, what things that apply to you that you need to change and what things apply to the greater system that we need to have change with. Where can you make an impact? And think about yourself and in your role. If you're a faculty member, if you're an administrator, if you're a staff person, each position matters at every level. And as Keith mentioned, there's the department level, there's the individual level, then the department level, the college level, the university level. And so you are part and you journey on all those levels. So in our last presentation, we introduced the topics. We talked about the challenges and the difficulties, what things have changed, what things seem to be easy or difficult, what things might be blocking you, what things might you be able to take advantage of. Hi, this is Kathy Derrick. One challenge that still continues with me is while I'm interpreting, I'll see microaggressions to the individual that I'm interpreting to, whether it's about an identity, not necessarily race. And there's a microaggression that I've heard in the source message, and I'm like, gosh, what do I do with that? I'm a white person with privilege. That person's a white person with privilege. And I feel like I want to be an ally, but it's as an interpreter, I'm supposed to convey the message that was heard. And it's a conundrum that I face.
That's a very good point. This is not necessarily related, but I think about something as simple as a name. If people have a unique name, say like, oh, that person, their name, oh, it's so long, A-L, and they have the face of like, who knows what their name is. But sometimes, when we think about that, that's really disrespectful of a person's identity and who they are. So that's kind of one of my favorite examples of a microaggression. People have experienced that before when they have unique names or names with many letters. You might think that it doesn't hurt anyone, but imagine that person who has that experience over and over again. So, why not ask this person to spell their name one more time? Tell the person honestly, your name is unique, and it'd be really helpful if you spelled it again for me, instead of having the facial expression of, their name is long and you really don't care about getting it right. So just the different things that people can face that are microaggressions. And Keith said, good point about finger spelling the names correctly and with respect. Yeah, and even the way we sign. The person who is doing that, saying that the name has a lot of letters and they don't know how to spell it, is not intending to offend that other person, but it's something that we need to start thinking about, because if it happens to this person over and over again, that can really be impactful.
This is Rachel signing. I was just thinking that something we've learned from the slides, I don't think it's on this slide today, but it's intention. What is the person's intention? Many of us, the first thing we hear, maybe we've experienced offense, somebody's feelings have been hurt. Automatically, we kind of said, oh, I didn't mean to do that. That wasn't my intention. And it's okay to understand that it may not have been your intention, but I think we need to think about our behavior before we act. and think about the impact of that before we say something, before we express something, before we do something, and understand how it will be perceived by the receiver and what it could feel like. And it's not that we need to understand another person's completely lived experience, but it's understanding that there are diverse perspectives and understanding that there are diverse frames of mind, and making a commitment to accept the differences, and knowing that there are good intentions, but you want to think about the impact of them before acting or saying anything. This slide ties to the individual, to think about yourself. In my role, in what I do, how can I act? And think about the previous slide. Alicia and I were planning this, and we were ready for a wonderful discussion. And as we were playing the presentation, we wanted this to be less structured, because we didn't want people to feel overwhelmed or feel intimidated in any way by this discussion. When we have a structured agenda, it can limit people's thinking. This slide is to expand your thinking. These are things to keep in mind. It's not for right now, in this hour, in the moment. We need data, we need research, we need to check in with people, we need to document lived experiences, we need to listen, we need to actively listen, and we also need to reflect on what we've experienced and how our own perspectives may change as a result, and our actions will change.
Right. And really, that comment leads beautifully into this next slide, and which is again food for thought. I mean, we already identified even today, and being aware of these things, providing examples, the importance of listening to others' perspectives. Often we're moving along too quickly to really understand other people's perspectives, and are just doing what we're used to doing because of the way that we grew up, without thinking about other cultures. So representation really does matter. Like Keith mentioned earlier about the mannequins, I grew up in the 80s. So trying to find a doll who looked like me was a challenge. And that's something that's really important for children. Even my daughter, who is 4, is already noticing the differences between, black and white. So it's just something that's kind of innate. So that happens early on, in our life. The things that society has set up are things that just become a part of us from a really young age. And so doing these things is really important, and actions matter. We can sit here and talk about everything that we want to do and should do, about the workshops that we've been to. But my hope is that what you will take with you from today is using those reflections and the things that you learned to act and make things better. And like we said, everyone has unique backgrounds and experiences, including everyone who's at this workshop. So really that just makes everything more beautiful. Maybe if you're lacking something, but whatever you have instead of that makes you more beautiful. Maybe you can't hear, but ASL is beautiful. So all our view are valued, and all of you matter. And so when somebody lets you know what their experience is, take that as a blessing, that they're willing to provide, a peek into what their life is like and their experience. and know that sometimes BIPOC people feel alone because often they are in certain environments. That issues will come up. Um, we have to stop telling our self stories. I have a great executive team that I'm working with, and we want to do better for NTID, but I can't really tell you enough how often my team reminds me of things. If I didn't have them, I would be drowning. So the point is, nobody can do this alone. Not just the BIPOC community, but the white community as well. And that's why we need to work together. And even better, alongside with each other to dismantle the systems and make things better for everyone. You really can make a difference, truly. Always think about intention. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from an authentic place? Does anyone in the audience have any final thoughts or things that they'd like to say? I just have to say that I've really enjoyed your participation, be it coming on screen or in your chat. I just, feel really excited that NTID is moving in the right direction. In my time in college, I can't imagine having a university-wide discussion or a city-wide discussion. We would have it in clubs and organizations on a smaller level, but having an anti-racism plan that everyone is talking about is a big deal. And having support from the administration, it's even better. We are in this together, absolutely. Most definitely.